what's up guys? Dizzy Nuts here. How you guys doing? So today we're actually talking about ISO, one of 3 videos that I've done. This is actually the last one explaining what is ISO. So without further ado, let's go ahead and walk around Epcot and talk about ISO. Now, if you haven't already, please check out my other 2 videos, which are the shutter speed and f-stop, because as you know, it's 3 components that make up the triangle of exposure, which is the shutter speed, f-stop, and ISO, which is what we're talking about today. Now, all of them are related to each other, so whatever changes on one is going to affect the other 2. When we talk about ISO on what is film, it's actually the sensitivity to light of the chemicals, which you know that photographs are actually made with chemicals. In this case, the good old Kodak days, like people like to say. In the case of digital photography, you know that we have a digital sensor, and that means the sensitivity of the sensor. The way that ISO is measured is actually with a number, and actually the lower the number, the better quality of the photo of your sensor will give. So in this case, many of them start at 100, some of them actually go down to 50, and then it creeps up little by little. Now, you're probably thinking, why would I care about this? Because what happens is that the more sensitive your sensor is, the more it is subject to digital noise, which if you've ever taken a photo at nighttime with a camera, or even sometimes with some of the older phones, you see all that, you know, grain on it and it just looks terrible. That is the camera trying to compensate by adjusting the ISO to a really high number, in this case making it more sensitive, and then basically, you know, getting all that digital noise and grainy look to the photo. When it comes to putting the settings on the camera, the ISO will actually be the last one. I usually start with the shutter speed because I want to be able to freeze the action. The second is the f-stop, which is how much light I'm letting in, and then third is the ISO. So that's usually my order when I'm setting up for a photo. So many times I'll put it in as auto. For example, in the case of the shutter speed, which is how fast it lets the light in, that's a setting that I want to be able to control because I don't want something to come out blurry, or I want to shoot something that's fast motion. And when it comes to the f-stop, I want to be able to shoot something that is, you know, has a nice bokeh on it, or I'm shooting a dark ride, stuff like that. So when it comes to the ISO, it's really something that, you know, many people will just set the auto, which is okay, and I do it sometimes, many times. Okay, so probably the next question you're going to ask me is, what ISO settings should I use on my camera? Well, that all depends on the camera and what you're trying to shoot. I know, sounds pretty non-explaining to what the question is, but I will say this. If you have a new camera, go ahead and start taking photos on automatic, like I've mentioned before, and get a feel for what looks good ISO-wise and some of the other settings. And that way you know what you can get away with ISO-wise, because sometimes, you know, people will like the photo even though it has a little bit of that digital noise in it. Some people will like it, some people won't. So you got to learn what your camera can do and what it can do, and what's susceptible to you and what is something that you can get away with. Now, I will be honest, some cameras, the more expensive they are, the better they are in high ISOs, which is one of the features, which is why they are so expensive, because the sensor can work better in low light situations. Now, as we walk around a little bit here by Epcot, I'm waiting for it to get a little dark, because that way what we're going to do, we're actually going to take a couple shots, and I'm going to only adjust the ISO so you can see what I'm talking about when it comes to digital noise. For our test shots, we're actually going to be using these 2 photos here, and these were actually taken by a awesome Disney photographer, Maritza. Hopefully this doesn't mind that we use her photos as examples and we bring up the ISO all the way up. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is actually where in day shots you would actually have a different ISO besides 100. So for example, in this case, we're going to be shooting a photo of the monorail, and I set my shutter speed to 250, because if you saw my video of shutter speed, the higher the number, the more we freeze the action. Now by doing that, as you know, as a triangle exposure, everything is connected and everything affects everything else. So as I adjust my shutter speed up, my ISO is going to go up as well, because I'm having less time for the light to hit the sensor, so the sensor becomes more sensitive to grab that photo. And this is done all when the camera is set to automatic. The next shot here is actually at the American Pavilion, and here was the same thing. I wanted to set my shutter speed really fast, in this case to 320, because I wanted to freeze the action of the soldiers coming in. And you can see here where, depending on the day, it actually adjusts the ISO to 500 to be able to adjust to get that perfect exposure. The next one is actually a really extreme case, and this is where I actually set my shutter speed to 1/4000th of a second, because I wanted to capture the raindrops, literally the drops in the air. And by doing that, the camera again has to adjust the ISO to a high number to be able to capture the most light possible in that short time, in this case 1/4000th of a second. And you can see where it set its ISO to 1250. Again, all these three are all set automatic. I just want to show you what happens when you adjust the shutter speed, how it affects the ISO. Now note that on your camera you can actually select the minimum and maximum ISO range that you want to be able to use. And for this case, we're going to go into the menu, the red menu, and then on number 2 you'll see the second option that says ISO speed settings. If I tap on that, you'll see 4 options. The first one is the ISO setting that it has right now. The second one is the range for stills, which is the ISO options that you want to give, that you can select during any time of taking a photo. For example, if you don't want to be able to select 6400 for any reason, that's where you would change it. Now the auto range is the range that you are telling the camera that you accept for it to have as the minimum and highest. So in this case, if I want to say that when I'm shooting auto, I want the minimum to be 100, but I want the maximum to be let's say 3200, this is where I would set it, and that will then restrict the camera when shooting in auto on your ISO, that it would only go up to 3200. The next thing I want to show you is 3 different scenes and the ISO settings that I have for each one of them. The first one, as you can see here, it's pure daylight at Magic Kingdom. I usually set my ISO here to auto. I don't worry about it too much, because when there's a lot of daylight coming in, the sensor is going to get all that information it needs, and it's going to go down to the lowest number possible, in this case ISO 100, which will give us that really good quality. The second shot is actually a sunset shot at Galaxy's Edge. Now here you can actually set your ISO to something to automatic, but in this case I wanted to lock it down to 100 to be able to get that really good crisp sharp photo and get the best possible out of my sensor. Many times if you do this handheld, your ISO would probably go up to 1800, and again, that quality of that photo at that ISO is all depending up to you. And in my case, if you bring a tripod for stuff like this, when you're locking it down to ISO 100, makes a difference on a regular photo to an amazing photo. The next one, as you can see, obviously is a night shot, and here I locked it down to ISO 100. Now doing that forces the camera to adjust the shutter speed to be able to let in enough light. Since it's dark, it's going to actually go up to sometimes even over 30 seconds. So this is where you're going to bring a tripod as well to get those really cool shots. Okay guys, so that's it here from Epcot. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and understand a little bit better what ISO is and what it can do for your Disney photography. Now, if this is the first time watching this video, my name is Disney Nuts, and as you can see, I do theme park photography as well as other parks as well. And I show you the basics all the way up to some of the more complicated stuff. That way you can get your photography going. Now feel free to comment below on topics that you'd like to see on this channel. I'd love to share any information that I can hopefully provide for you guys. So again, thanks for watching. If you just subscribed, thanks again. Until then, stay awesome. See ya. Bye.